Hello everyone, Kagaman Kawa here from Kagaman's Wonderland, or Vant, and I'm here with another episode of Kagaman's Crazy Convos. Fun fact, this is actually the first time I've said the name of the series in this series, so just for further reference, these videos where I'm just rambling to the camera, not much editing, just having a discussion about something Thomas related or otherwise, they're called Kagaman's Crazy Convos, and it's actually a name that my good friend Jordan Klein came up with. He's my best friend, and he's worked with me for many, many years, and he's been my friend for even more years, and he's worked with me, so shout out to you, Jordan. I know it's very early in the video, but shout out to you. So let's just rip the band-aid off immediately. Some leaks came out recently about the 2026 Thomas the Tank Engine new series, in particular the new merchandise for the series, and I decided to come on here today and give you guys my thoughts on them, because I feel like I have a very nuanced opinion on them, because, I'm 20 years old. I've, experienced pretty much all eras of Thomas the Tank Engine. When I was a kid, I watched it on Sprout and PBS Kids. And, I had all the DVDs of the classic series, the hit era, the CGI. I even had some Brenner era DVDs too. And, I grew up watching the good CGI seasons ripped on YouTube by Thomas fans. I was there throughout the Big World, Big Adventures. I was there, throughout All Engines Go. I didn't watch All Engines Go personally. It's not my cup of tea, but if you like it, that's fine. Me personally, I don't like it. That's just me. But this is a safe space for any fan of any era of the show. So just putting that out there. I bring all this up to say that, I have a very well-rounded, sort of take on Thomas the Tank Engine. I had a later appreciation for the Railway Series books because I didn't personally grow up with them, but I knew of them. My dad got me a complete collection book, which is actually over there. I probably should have brought it out, but yeah, he got me a complete collection book, and I even knew the stories before that time because I would watch remakes of them on YouTube or audio stories. So I'm very well versed in all things Thomas the Tank Engine. And in this year of 2025, I started my YouTube channel, Kagaman's Wonderland. I returned to YouTube, where I'm making a series called Rolling Around on Sodor, a hybrid series of Thomas the Tank Engine elements and various other, real-life influences of railways all over the world. It's going to have all sorts of characters in it, including characters from Chuggington that will be adapted into a Thomas the Tank Engine style. It's a very versatile and, very interesting series that I can't wait to share more of it with you. You've already seen a little taste of it in my train spotting video and throughout my custom showcases, but enough about myself. Today we're going to be doing a reaction to the new toys. Well, there's really not going to be much editing in this video apart from me flashing up on screen the toys that I'm looking at and, anything else relevant. So this is mostly just, a yap fest. So I hope you guys enjoy that, and I hope you guys get a kick out of this sort of style of video, because I really have a lot of thoughts to share about, the potential direction of the new show and my feelings on these toys. And, I think I have a pretty good, well-rounded and unbiased take considering my history with this franchise and the type of person I am. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. Okay, so here's how this is going to work. I have the Thomas the Tank Engine wiki opened up on my laptop, and on this side of the screen, you will see the things that I'm looking at. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the new die-cast Henry. Now, at the time of December 2025, we don't have a name for this range, but, we're just going to be calling it the new die-cast because that's what it is. Now, right off the bat, I know a lot of people have been talking about this. The face is very jarring, to say the least. And that is true. It is indeed a very different look for the Henry character. And me personally, the face actually does not bother me. That might surprise a lot of you because, face is a big part of the character, but something that a lot of people need to keep in mind is that this is a reboot. It's pretty much a start over. When we first saw All Engines Go, I'm not going to pretend like it didn't jar me. Like, All Engines Go, of course it jarred me as someone who grew up with the classic series and loves the CGI stuff. All Engines Go was very jarring, especially certain character designs like Diesel with his massive forehead and, the complete personality shift he had, as well as the personality shift pretty much all those characters had. But again, it was a whole different continuity, and in the defense of All Engines Go, it actually did some things better. From my understanding, the voice cast was, I would say, excellent. I think a lot of them got awards and stuff for their performances on All Engines Go, and quite frankly, All Engines Go handled international characters and diversity quite better than the Big World, Big Adventures era of Thomas that preceded it. So, you know, getting that out there, even though I personally don't like All Engines Go, there's nice things to say about it. But focusing on this Henry toy, I'm looking at it and I'm immediately noticing that it's very reminiscent of the CGI Thomas, like the Thomas of seasons 13 through 24 before the All Engines Go switch. And something I'm noticing is that Henry has his classic Thomas the Tank Engine look back, because in All Engines Go, he was pretty much a retooling of Gordon. But here in this new 2026 series, and again, I'm going to be judging the toys, assuming they look like this in the 2026 series, Henry has his, you know, his classic tender shape. He has his original dome color back. He has his wheel configuration. And overall, this is a very excellent Henry toy, I feel. And now, something worth noting is that the magnets are back. Now, someone on Twitter pointed this out. I'm not on Twitter because just no, but someone on Twitter pointed out that the magnets have little arrows on them, and they speculated that that means that they're one-way magnets. Now, I don't think I like that. I'm going to be honest. I don't like that because the versatility of having a magnet, and the point of having a magnet, in my opinion, is to connect them both ways. Now, I know the wooden railway system had a one-way connection, but that's different in my opinion. The wooden railway system was its own thing. You know, it was you know, meant to be compatible with Brio and Imaginarium and the other wooden railway systems that were out at the time. And plus, it just seemed logical. You know what I mean? That was sort of like a characteristic of the wooden railway system. But this is not a wooden railway system. This is a die-cast system, like Take Along, Take and Play, and Ertl, the stuff that you see in my videos. And so I'm going to be judging it as a die-cast system, not a wooden railway system. And judging this as a die-cast system, it's very bizarre to have one-way magnets. But I'm honestly not against the concept of magnets coming back. Because again, we don't know for certain if it is a one-way magnet, but assuming that it is, you know, that's kind of iffy. You know, I don't really like that. I would have preferred if they were the smart magnets that could go either way. But, you know, again, this is all speculative. We don't know for certain. But judging the toy purely based on looks, there's a lot to like about it. For starters, I really like the shade of green. It's a darker shade of green than Henry has ever been depicted in the television series. This shade of green is very dark. It actually kind of looks like Duck's shade of green from the CGI series. Because in the CGI show, Duck is a bit of a darker shade of green. But overall, looking at this Henry toy, it's very proportional, which I really like. The tender has the wrong amount of wheels. My good friend Ryan Numpty Pootis on YouTube, he pointed this out to me. Now, me personally, a tender not having the right amount of wheels doesn't really bother me because, you know, in the wooden railway system, they don't have the right amount of wheels. They have 2 wheels. And in the die-cast system, yeah, they generally have the correct amount of wheels, you know, 6 wheels. And it could have been very easy to put a 6 wheel on there. But me personally, it doesn't really bother me that much because to me, you know, it's about the big picture. Like, for example, Henry's tender is the correct shape. You know, that sort of weird shape where it's like that. It kind of looks like a couch with an elongated back. It's sort of a weird metaphor, but yeah, you know, Henry's tender sort of looks like that. But in the Adventures toys and in All Engines Go, Henry has like a Fowler tender, like Gordon or James or Edward. And that, you know, that sort of removes a bit of the charm of the Henry character in the television series. Now, in the Railway series and my AU, that's different. But talking purely about the television series, you need that tender as a mark of distinction for Henry. So the tender shape being correct, I like that a lot. And the overall proportions of Henry, I'm looking at him, and he doesn't seem to differ at all from his previous portrayal in the CGI series. He doesn't seem to have any All Engines Go carryovers except for the eyes. Now, the face is definitely an interesting, very interesting. It's very, when I first saw it and another character's face, which we're going to get into, I was very jarred because I was like, wow, it kind of looks like, I don't know, like, you know, this is kind of an ignorant thing to say, but like the generic style of like those late 2000s and like 2010s 3D animated movies made by all sorts of studios. They kind of look like that, you know, where it's just like, he just looks so, I don't even know what the right word is, but he looks a little bit uncanny. But to be honest, the face doesn't really bother me because, again, this is a new interpretation of the character, and I actually quite like the green eyes. My good friend Jordan, when we were talking about All Ages Go, he brought up how it's kind of, you know, tropey to give them the same colored eyes as their paint work, because it's like, you know, it's not even original. And quite frankly, I do see that point. But I quite like this portrayal of the character, this new portrayal that they seem to be doing, because it's like, okay, it gives him a bit of character, give him the green eyes, it makes the engine more lively. Really, so I personally don't mind the eyes being green. Plus, it adds in like a storytelling standpoint, I believe, and like a visual storytelling standpoint, because it's another way to differentiate Henry from the other characters. But talking purely about the toy again, assuming it's of the same build quality as the 2025 diecast releases and these up here, I would say this is a very solid Henry. I heard that the tenders are permanently attached. Also something I don't like, assuming that's true, because that was a big downside about the Ertl. Because, being able to detach the tenders is a very big part of playability, because there are a lot of episodes where characters are disconnected from their tenders or a mishap happens with their tender throughout all eras of the original Thomas and Friends show. So the tenders being permanently attached is is an issue, in my opinion. Overall, looking at this Henry, the only real criticisms I have are, not counting any bias towards the previous iterations of Thomas the Tank Engine, the only real criticisms I have are the one-way magnets, and that's more of a nitpick, because again, the wooden railway system did that, but again, this is a die-cast system, so I'm judging it as a die-cast system. Don't like the one-way magnets, and I also don't like the permanently attached tenders, but I do like the proportions. I like that they've returned to the classic CGI look, and quite frankly, it is a classic look, because the show's been CGI for almost 20 years now, which sounds crazy, but it's true, because the CGI switch is going to turn 20 years in 3 years. I like the return to the classic tender. I like the return to the classic CGI look, and I don't really have much else to say besides that. I think the wheels are very good. They're a holdover from the previous range that we had this year, and yeah, I don't have anything else to really add, but again, the face is definitely new. It's not at all something I'm used to, but again, I haven't seen it in action. I don't know what style this new anime show is going to have, but the face, in my opinion, it will take some getting used to, but it's not something that personally bothers me. So let's just move on to Gordon. Next up, we have Gordon, and I will admit, this face does bug me a bit, because less so its appearance, because now that I look at it a bit longer, it does look like Gordon. It has the Gordon nose, it has the Gordon sort of pointed nose, long nose. It has the Gordon sort of cheek definition. The eyebrows are very thick, but at the same time, they're not alien to Gordon. Gordon's been portrayed with sort of thick-ish eyebrows, or pronounced eyebrows before, and he has the blue eyes that carry over from the All Engines Go. Aesthetically speaking, Gordon has returned to his look in the latest iteration of the CGI show back in 2020, where he has the express head code lamps and he has his handrails. An interesting change that I've only recently noticed today is that Gordon appears to be a darker shade of blue. I'm not sure how deliberate this is, because in a different merch range that's new as well, Thomas is shown and he has his standard Thomas blue, but this Gordon here has a darker shade of blue. Again, I'm not sure how intentional that is, but assuming that carries over into the main show, I actually don't have a problem with this. I don't have a problem with this at all, because there are some merch ranges, particularly off the top of my head, I know Hornby, and I think there's definitely something else. It's escaping me at the moment, but there are a lot of different merch ranges that play around with the shade of blue. They're not always exactly like the show, so seeing Gordon in a darker shade of blue is actually a nice change of pace, I think, because, a lot of laymen that I know, they mix up characters like Thomas and Gordon and Edward. To me, I don't get it, because they look nothing alike. Gordon's got all these wheels, Edward's got so little wheels, and Thomas has 6 wheels. But, to a layman who knows nothing about locomotives, yeah, it is easy to mix them up, so I think giving Gordon, one of the most popular characters in Thomas the Tank Engine, a different shade of blue, was a very good choice. And I think my friends might appreciate this choice a lot, because, we all really like Gordon, but, it's easy to mix up Gordon and Thomas back here. Because, yeah, blue engines, if you don't know a lot about engines, or even a little about engines, it's easy to mix them up. So I get it. But as far as positives, without repeating myself talking about Henry, I like the molded lamps. I don't think the diecast ranges ever had molded lamps on anything. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe any diecast toy, apart from the ones that had the little lights and sounds features, none of them ever had casual, dummy, you could call it, molded lamps. Now, Gordon's running board is not painted, it's red, but in all fairness, the diecast ranges have never painted the running boards, so again, it's not something that personally bothers me. And, the more I look at the face, the more it does look like Gordon to me. It's just a different style. Like, the CGI series was derivative of the model series, and the model series was derivative of the original Railway series illustrations by Clarence Reginald Dalby. So, there's a evolution there. The Dalby illustrations, well, actually, I guess it's Reginald Payne, then the Dalby illustrations, then the classic series, then the CGI, then the All Engines Go if you want to go there, and it's this. So there's a lot of facial evolution going on, but we can see the traits that stuck around, and those are Gordon's pronounced cheeks, his his nose, and the sort of size of his face, which may seem obvious, but these are very core things to remember when you have the Gordon character right here. But without dragging it, there really isn't much to say. I personally really like this toy. I'm gonna be honest. I really like it. It's probably one of the best die-cast Gordons we've had in a long time. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me because, some people just like the old stuff. They can't get past change, and that's fine. But me personally, I've talked to a lot of people who are fans. I've talked to people a lot who are fans my whole life. But I've mostly been talking recently to people who aren't fans or people who used to be fans. And they have a lot of fresher, nuanced takes on the franchise that have really shaped me. And me personally, when I look at this Gordon, it doesn't really offend me. The only things that offended me, like I said, are the non-detachable tenders and the one-way magnets. I think that's kind of lame. But apart from that, if they had dual magnets and the tenders could detach, I would have no complaints about these toys, really. I mean, anything else is just kind of nitpicky. But yeah, overall, I think this diecast Gordon is very good. Again, the face is definitely something. I mean, I can see a lot of memes being made about this face, but I would say this is actually more like Gordon than the All Engines Go. And that's not a jab at All Engines Go Gordon, because he's actually a very sweet character from what I learned. I mean, he's not the Gordon we know, but he's very sweet. And Neil Crone has just an amazing voice, and he's voiced Gordon before in another Thomas thing that's controversial, but Neil Crone's amazing. So, no hate to the All Engines Go Gordon, but this is more Gordon than that guy is. And I think a lot of my friends in the community and outside of the community can agree on that. Next up is James. Now, I have a bit stronger feelings on James. Now, first of all, he appears to borrow heavily from the All Engines Go James. I believe his eye color is a carryover from All Engines Go. And I believe the gray wheels are also a carryover from All Engines Go. Now, for you Thomas fans who follow my channel, I know a lot of you are probably going to say that James has been depicted with gray wheels, since the 2000s in a lot of promotional art and also in a lot of the merchandise ranges like the Take and Play, early Take-Along, I mean. And I believe certain wooden railway toys like the battery operated or something like that. And while it is true, it's kind of interesting how that's carried over so long, even to this recent merchandise where James has the gray wheels. But the gray wheels, I feel like that's kind of nitpicky to complain about, because it's like James has had gray wheels for so long that doesn't even really bother me for real. But James's nose is what's actually griping me a bit, because one thing about James the Red Engine is, I think you can see it right there, and you can even see it better up here. He has a round nose, and that's actually quite important because it's a big part of James's character. Honestly, it's a big part of separating him from the other characters, because Henry's nose is flat and straight, and Gordon's nose is flat with a bit of a point, and James's nose is normally round, but here it's pointy. Now, I can only assume this is a deliberate decision, because I believe the other variation of this James, which you'll see later, also has a pointy nose. I don't really like that, but again, it's a whole new take on the character. If this is the direction they're going, it's fine. It's really semantic to complain about a nose. I sound like a Sonic the Hedgehog fan right now. You know how those guys complained about, the arm colors. To me, it's just like, it's whatever, okay? The nose is different, okay? It's a whole new take on the character. The All Engines Go was a whole new take on this character. But talking just about this James toy, I don't really have any gripes with it. This is kind of a nitpick, but I wish the tender was smaller, because, again, it would illustrate that James is a smaller engine than Gordon and Henry. But, at the same time, it's like, I'm sure it was just a cost-cutting measure, I mean, these days, everyone wants to cut costs, so I get it. The tender being that big, to be honest, I think that is sort of a major gripe, because, James being smaller than Gordon and Henry is very important from a visual storytelling and, you know, lore perspective. But again, new canon. I don't know what they got going on in that new canon, but I'm sure if this is reflective of how it looks in the show, then fine. But if we find out about this new Thomas show and James has the shorter tender, then this is an inaccuracy that I will hold against it. But overall, my thoughts on this James, I like it overall. Like I said, tender's a bit of a gripe for me. The pre-existing gripes about the couplings and the permanently attached tender exist, but I don't really have a problem with the details. I don't have a problem with the wheels. The wheel configuration is correct. I really like that. I really like the front of this James. Like, ignoring the tender, I really like the front. The face is gonna take a lot of getting used to. I think it's my least favorite face personally, at least so far, because it's like, it's so hard to see James with anything but a round nose. But, you know, again, I'm not against radically different interpretations of the show, because my series is a radically different interpretation of the show. And I know some people will think, but Vance, you dislike All Engines Go. So what? I also dislike Big World Big Adventures, which is also a radically different take on Thomas. But I don't dislike the CGI series, and I also don't dislike, as crazy as it sounds, I don't dislike Thomas and the Magic Railroad. And those are all very different takes on Thomas. So it's like, everyone's got their preferences. You know, I'd never hate on somebody for liking All Engines Go or even liking this, because quite frankly, I might be in the boat of liking this, because truly, the only things I've noticed so far are things that aren't really new issues, just issues Mattel's been had. But yeah, I like the molded lamp, like I said previously, and James looks like James apart from the nose, and you know, the nose is really gonna get some getting used to. I know I've repeated that like a million times, but the nose is just, but you know, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so the next one is Percy. Now, we can't really get a good look at Percy because we only have a side view, but I really just don't have much to say. It looks like Percy. It's proportional. It's cute. It has the CGI details. We've reverted back to a CGI-looking Percy. We no longer have the All Engines Go-looking Percy. This is a CGI reminiscent Percy, and I like it a lot. I mean, what can I say? I wish I could get a better look at that face, but from the side profile, it appears that Percy still has his round nose, which is good, honestly, because Percy's sort of, you know, a cutesy, small character, so it's like having him with a pointy nose wouldn't really fit. But overall, if I didn't know any better, if I didn't know that this was for the new 2026 series, I would just think this is a standard re-edition anniversary Percy, so I don't really have much to say on that front. Moving on to the next one. Okay, this one's actually a blank. There's supposedly going to be an Emily in this range. We haven't seen it yet, but I just wanted to mention that in the video in case someone in the comments wants to bring it up. There's supposedly going to be an Emily in this range. We don't have any pictures yet. We just have confirmation. Moving on. Now, here is the big controversial one, Annie. Now, for those of you who are not in the know, there are many different styles of faces in Thomas the Tank Engine. There are embedded faces, which are faces that are the same color as the engine or truck or rolling stock body, and then there are gray faces, which is self-explanatory. In the books, we had gray faces and embedded faces. In the early classic series, we had gray faces and embedded faces. In fact, quite frankly, throughout all of Thomas the Tank Engine, we had gray faces and embedded faces, just that, you know, towards the end, like after season 18 or so, they just started introducing all the characters with gray faces. The last embedded face characters were the slip coaches, but here's my hot take, and I don't really like the word hot take because it's like, you know, just say your opinion. You don't need to like sugarcoat it with like, oh, here's my dramatic hot take. It's like, dude, relax, just say your opinion. But I like it. I actually kind of prefer it, because here's the thing. Nothing beats those classic sweet Annie and Clarabelle faces. I always think back to like the Tomy and the Wooden Railway and the Take Along, charming faces, but you know, at the same time, giving them 3D gray faces makes them more expressive, and it makes them more feel a part of the universe, in my opinion. And I got nothing against that. I actually quite like it. I actually think this is an improvement, because, you know, forget purism, you know, it's like, we had a beautiful classic Thomas the Tank Engine that was crafted by Britt Allcraft, rest in peace, and David Mitton, rest in peace. It was a beautiful 5-season show, and then from season 6 to season 12, we had the hit era, and then after that, we had all the CGI stuff, and, you know, it's just like, we had a lot of every era, and the fans, like Carson's Video Workshop, and many others, they've mastered telling stories in all these different eras, you know? So it's like, if you want to fix that era, something new and nuanced from that era, you got it here on YouTube. You know, Mattel's not going to give it to you. I've accepted that for a long time, but I'm quite frankly looking forward to something new, because it's like, this is YouTuber Bad Mannered Productions. I don't agree with him on everything, but I'm a big fan of his content, I'll say that. And I agree with one take he had, which is, you know, looking back at something from your childhood and liking it, but also thinking, how could have this evolved? And this is how I feel about this Annie right here. I would have liked for, you know, the Annie and Clarabelle characters to evolve to have gray faces like Henrietta. Henrietta and Thomas and Friends is Toby's carriage. For those of you who are out of the know, Toby is the little brown number 7 tram engine. Henrietta used to not be a character. She had no face. Then they gave her a face. She became a character. And quite frankly, she became one of the best characters, perhaps even the best female character. I mean, who knows? But Henrietta has a lot of personality, and I think it's because of that face. And I think by giving Annie and Clarabelle these gray faces, it adds a lot of character to them, and it really transforms them in this new era. And spoiler alert, Annie and Clarabelle in my series were always intended to have gray faces, actually. It was something I decided long before this announcement, just to get that out the way. I actually decided this way back when, I think actually Bad Mannered Productions and a few others inspired me to do that, because I saw their takes on Annie and Clarabelle with like non-embedded faces, and I was like, oh, that's cool. But to talk about the toy, I think it's good. I think the details are great. Annie and Clarabelle, we only have Annie here, but they seem to retain the All Engines Go side detailings, and I could be wrong, but I think that's a cursive A on her side to represent Annie. Now, here's the deal, man. My good friend Ryan brought up the point that why do they need to remove the English names on some characters if it's just a name? And that's a good point. Yeah, the names don't change in other languages, but the thing is, sometimes they do. Certain characters, I know a bunch of the random new CGI characters like Scruff, Timothy, etc., they had different names in other dubs. I know Rusty and some of the narrow gauge engines had different names in like the, you know, random dubs like Dutch and whatever they speak in Finland and etc., German, all these other countries and across Asia and Europe and wherever else. A lot of the characters were renamed, as tends to happen when translation, you know, sometimes they'll change the name to something more common over there. You know, it's good to not have a Eurocentric mindset when it comes to analyzing everything, because you got to think about, you know, Thomas is global now. It's not just in the UK, it's in the United States and Australia and Germany and Japan, definitely. Those guys just can't get enough of Thomas. So I can understand certain things needing to change, you know, like I can understand why the milk tankers and the tar tankers no longer have milk and tar written on their sides in the CGI show, because a symbol is more universal. A nuclear symbol or a danger symbol, you know, the triangle with the arrow, that could be understood regardless of what language you speak. But an English name, you know, not everyone understands English names. That's the truth. You know, the world isn't Eurocentric. A lot of people come from different backgrounds. It's just the truth. So I don't really have any criticisms about this Annie and Clarabelle. Now, what would have elevated this Annie and Clarabelle would have been if you could see through the windows, like on the Take Along and Take and Play. And I really don't think that would have been that hard to do, especially considering they did it before, like recently with like the previous, like I think in the past 5 years they did like some variation of Annie and Clarabelle with like see-through windows. In fact, I think these rolling stock right here, they have see-through windows and compartments or whatever. So it wouldn't have been that hard to do. But looking at this base Annie and Clarabelle, I think it's pretty good. I mean, the windows seem to be like a yellowish color to insinuate there's light inside, and I think that's good enough, honestly. For 2025 merch standards, and even in comparing it to the older stuff, this absolutely clears, in my opinion. In my opinion, I think this clears quite a lot of stuff Mattel's done recently. I would even say it clears the Adventures take on these characters, maybe even the Take and Play from 2014, because it's just like, you know, it's proportional. I think this is like way more proportional, because like those were kind of squished. I ain't gonna hold you. Like I'm sure you guys remember a lot of the, you know, it absolutely clears any Trackmaster Annie and Clarabelle too from recent years, ever since 2014. Let's get out of the way, because they had a fixation on rolling stock that just had stickers on the side. There was no see-through stuff. And again, this has no see-through stuff either, but I could look at it and I can see that it's not just printing, it's molding. It's like 3D, like it's a mold. And honestly, overall, the symboling, like I was talking about, I like it. That's a carryover from All Engines Go. It's actually something I like from All Engines Go, their designs in that show. So I'm really glad it carried over. And you know what? I was actually talking about this with my buddy Jordan. If they're going to do a new Thomas the Tank Engine, they got to actually do something new. Don't like half do it, but like make it faithful. The reason I have so many issues with All Engines Go is because it's basically a whole new property with a Thomas show on it. If it wasn't Thomas and it was some other thing, right? Like it was just kids playing around or like some new train show, I probably would have liked it. The reason I don't like it presently is because I have an attachment to this. I have an attachment to the old classic Thomas. Now, some people might be saying, why are you able to look past this stuff when it comes to the new series, but not All Engines Go? And it's very simple because of how All Engines Go was carried out in practice. It wasn't a derivative of the old Thomas at all. It was just something else entirely masquerading with old Thomas IP names. This, from what I can tell, is the old Thomas in a lot of ways, but with new elements, new freshening up, new style. Now, we don't know for certain how it will play out in practice, but from what I can tell, this seems a lot more tasteful, a lot more innovative. And, of course, Mattel is always going to take some cost-cutting measures with the merchandise, as they've done since 2012. But talking from a creative standpoint, I don't dislike what I'm seeing. I like the gray roofs. I like the bright windows. I like the detailing, like the little patterns and the cursive and whatever. I think this is a very good coach, and quite frankly, if it's accessible, and depending on how big it is, that's a big one, depending on how big it is. I hope it's the same size as the diecast range they did previously, so it's compatible with my stuff. I might get a few, honestly, because the best part about this, for us custom makers and series makers, there's no name on the side. When you have a bunch of Annie and Clarabelles and you're trying to make some random coaches, and it's just like, you have to cover up the name on the side or just deal with it and accept that every coach on your railway is Annie or Clarabelle. You don't got to do that here, man. You got free, just like standard coaches for your little diecast series. It's awesome. But yeah, to close out on the Annie and Clarabelle thoughts, I like it, honestly. And quite frankly, the face looks like Annie and Clarabelle. It's got the nose. It's got the eyelashes. The eye color is a carryover from the All Engines Go. It has the Annie and Clarabelle DNA. If you showed me this face, I probably wouldn't be able to link it to Annie and Clarabelle at first because, I'm not used to seeing them with a gray face. But after you tell me the context, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I can see that. That's acceptable. And also, it's just something they were thinking about before. Back in season 12, they were going to change the faces on Annie and Clarabelle from embedded faces to animated ones to give them more character. And that was the right choice, honestly. I kind of wish they did that in the CGI show because it's like, yeah, it makes them a lot more expressive. Because don't get me wrong, in the CGI show, they made them very expressive. They were full-fleshed characters, but sometimes they looked a little uncanny, let's be honest. Sometimes the flat faces sort of prevented them from, expressing fully in a non-uncanny way. Because sometimes when their faces would wrinkle up or try and be more expressive, the front of the coach body would sort of just warp in like a really weird way, in my opinion. Obviously, it doesn't make me uncomfortable because I grew up with this franchise, but I hope you guys are getting what I'm trying to say. So overall, my opinion, this Annie and Clarabelle is good with me. I like it a lot. I'm a fan. I'm a gray face Annie and Clarabelle apologist. Quite frankly, I'm a gray face apologist in general. Spoiler alert, but my Herald also has a gray face, so you might as well come for me for that as well, But that's actually all the diecast stuff we have to look at. There's a track pack. Again, I'm not going to even touch on this. I'm only going to say two things. One, there's a track adapter to the old Trackmaster 2-track, whatever. And I guess that's good for track compatibility. But the second thing, why is everything got to be Trackmaster now? You know what I mean? Why can't we just have a diecast line, a Wooden Railway line, an etc. line? Wooden Railway doesn't even exist anymore. Let's talk about that because they canceled Wooden Railway 2022. They should have just kept it around, honestly, because if they were just going to reboot the show like this. Because they think about this stuff years in advance. They should have just kept it around, but whatever. That was the previous video. We already talked about it. I think it's kind of silly to have multiple different sizes of ranges, but have them all use the same track. Like, on one hand, it would be different if you had a whole catalog, right? If you had, like, a whole catalog of characters like the old days. That's like, okay, some characters you didn't make in the motorized range can now play on the motorized track. Fair. But you're making the same characters in both ranges. There's nothing exclusive. There's no real, you know what I mean? So it's like, what's the point? I don't really get it. But again, it's like, what can you do? I mean, Mattel came up with the new Trackmaster in 2014, and they just stuck with it since. So I guess that's their golden goose, right? Trackmaster. They turned every merchandise range into Trackmaster, so I guess that's their golden goose. Me personally, I don't. Some people like my friend Dane, they've complained about the new track. Me personally, I never even liked the old track, so it's like we're all different here. We all have different takes. Me personally, I feel like Diecast should have stayed Diecast. Trackmaster should have stayed Trackmaster. And if they were going to cross over, then you should have had the Diecast range and the Trackmaster range be more expansive, so there would be more justification to crossing over. Like, let me have my Diecast Skarloey play around with my motorized Hero, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, but we don't have that. It's just the same characters over and over again. You know what I mean? But let's move on to the motorized range, which I think I have a bit more things to say. Okay, so we're on to the motorized range, and first thing off the bat, why do they have magnets? That's very strange. The motorized range appears to have magnets. What is with this magnet obsession all of a sudden? And it also feels kind of strange because it's like, again, I don't know how strong these magnets are, but if they're the dumb magnets, as they've been dubbed, like the ones that the 2014 Taken Place had, then that's no good. Because then they're going to be very weak connection, they're going to break on hills, etc. But I'm going to assume these are strong magnets, or at the very least, they're not going to have any crazy hills like the old days and the old Trackmaster. So whatever. I mean, I get the point of like cross-compatibility, connectability, but what was the point in changing the magnets? You should have just kept this connecting system because it's quite frankly stronger and you can attach more characters together, pretty much infinite characters together, because it's not going to snap. It's never going to snap. My friend Ryan made a very interesting point on how they should have kept the original hooks. The Adventures Thomas toys had like little hooks reminiscent of the knuckle couplings, the dap up coupling, as my friend Jordan likes to call them, that get together like this, and they basically never uncouple. So I really don't understand why they couldn't have just done that or just not changed this connection at all. Kind of a strange choice, but, again, you guys, we haven't seen it play out in practice. I'm not the type to get overly angry at, these sort of toys anymore. Another criticism I want to add is I don't think the motorized range should have magnets. And I would argue I don't even think the diecast range should either. It's either diecast has magnets, this has that, or give them both this, or give neither of them magnets, because it's like, it's either they're cross-compatible or they're not, and if they are going to be cross-compatible, make them cross-compatible this way because it's stronger. But, let's talk about the truck first. I don't really have anything to say about it. It's just a truck. It seems to be a pretty nice mold. I'll give them that. That's a pretty nice truck mold. Is that the same truck mold as the, I don't have it on me right now, but the Troublesome Trucks that came with this guy, I believe that's a similar mold, but whatever. It's a very nice mold. It's way better than just stickers, so I appreciate that. The Thomas seems to borrow aspects from this Thomas, so it seems to borrow pretty much the entirety of this part, from what I can tell. I think, yeah, the entirety of this part. I think the buffer beam's different. The face is obviously different. Now, what do I think of the face? Very bold of them to change Thomas's face, because Thomas's face has pretty much never changed. Even in the All Engines Go, he had the round nose, and I think he still had the triangle eyebrows. Someone could fact check me on that, but the point is, this is the most drastic change to Thomas's face ever. And what do I think of it? I'm not really sold on it, to be honest, but again, it's a new take on the character. I wasn't and still aren't sold on how Thomas looks in All Engines Go, but again, it's a whole different take on the character, a different universe. It's not the classic Thomas I grew up with. It doesn't affect me in any way. Whatever. But talking about this Thomas face, for some reason it kind of reminds me of like a rabbit. I don't know why. It just, maybe it's because of like the angle and the teeth, but it kind of looks like a rabbit. But the face itself I don't hate. I don't think it's like creepy or anything. It's just, it's not Thomas, he doesn't have the pointy eyebrows like I do. He doesn't have as chubby cheeks, the chubby cheeks is kind of a part of Thomas's character, So I don't really like that they changed his face, but apart from that, it's like, I feel like everything else is, whatever. He seems to have his handrail printing like this one does, reminiscent of the CGI show. He has 3 wheels that are the exact same size, which I think is an improvement. I think it's nice that the wheels are all the same size, and I don't really mind that at all. And quite frankly, there's a lot of missing painted details, but at the same time, it's like, it's Mattel, it's 2025, of course they're going to cut corners. Well, actually 2026, of course they're going to cut corners, but in my opinion, that's not a big deal. I mean, these details have been unpainted on these toys for well over 10 years. It's basically the standard now, you know, so it's like, it doesn't break my immersion, and it's not something that I think subtracts points. Whenever it is done in, like on toys like this, it's awesome, it's great. But like for a stock standard Thomas that comes in a 2-pack like this, you know, whatever. I mean, when we see the price, then we could have a whole debate about this should be painted if I'm paying this much, right? And generally speaking, I've kind of just accepted that those details are going to come undone. So my thoughts on this new Thomas look, I think it's a bit, like, the wheels are a bit distracting at first because I'm not used to them being all the same size. And yeah, it's very distracting at first, but overall, I don't really have a problem with it. I feel like the mechanism might be different, right? Because, how do I put this? It has a button on top instead of a switch, so I feel like they changed out the original motors that they've been using since 2014. I mean, there's no real way to tell just by looking at this, but I can only assume so. But if not, then Mattel really is committed to keeping Trackmaster the same. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add about this Thomas. It's another edition of this character. The only thing that is really bothering me is the face. But even then, it's just like, you know, it's a whole new take on the character. I mean, the All Engines Go Thomas, that entire design bothered me. You know, the face, the lining on the side, on how he no longer has like a cab door. I mean, of course he doesn't need it in that show, but it's like, yeah, it bothered me. But whole new take on the character, man. And yeah, I don't have much else to add, really. Let's go move on to the next one. Next is Gordon. Now, Gordon is mighty interesting. Now that I look at him a bit more, his tender seems to be a retooling of the previous tender mold, which in of itself was a retooling of the Steam and Go Gordon from quite a few years back. Mattel is just on a roll reusing these molds. Quite frankly, I don't really hate this Gordon either. This face looks like Gordon. It has the Gordon nose, has the Gordon cheeks. This looks more like Gordon than Thomas looks like Thomas. And it's the darker shade of blue. I don't really mind. In fact, I welcome the change. I welcome helping these characters look more different so that laymen can differentiate them more. Because now you're like, okay, Gordon's the dark blue one, Thomas is the baby blue one. It's awesome. I like how much bigger Gordon is. I like that he has, well, it's not the correct wheel configuration. He's missing an extra set of leading wheels, but, you know, that's semantics. I like that his buffers are oval. I like that he's returned to the CGI look. He doesn't seem to have the lamps. Now, if I go back to Thomas, did Thomas have a lamp? He did. Okay, so that's something I'm actually going to subtract from this Gordon. Because diecast Gordon established that Gordon having the lamps is status quo as per the previous iteration of this show. So this Gordon not having lamps is very strange. I'm not sure why we have that inconsistency. But overall, I don't dislike this Gordon. I actually quite like it. I actually quite like how different it is. And I think I like the Gordon face more than I like the Thomas face and James face, definitely. And I like how much longer it is while still presumably using the same chassis. It's kind of clever, admittedly. And I actually like the removable coal load because it plays into the fact that they're locomotives. You know, you could tell stories where it's like, Gordon needs to get a refill on coal, and that's cool. Now, I've seen some posts saying the tenders are permanently attached on these guys too, or they have some weird connection there. If the tender can couple up to another tender engine, you know what I mean? Like, you could swap out Gordon's tender for Henry's tender and couple them up that way. Fine, but I think having the tenders have a unique connector or no connector at all is just bad for playability. So, knocking points for that as well. But overall, my thoughts on this Gordon, I think it's an improvement over All Engines Go. And I think it's an improvement over Wubba as well. The Big World Big Adventures, I think it's an improvement. And I like the eye color. Again, I like the colored eyes. I like the length of it. I think it's a fun take on the character. I like the side rods. I really like the detailed on the side rods. The tender, you know, it's a bit short. If you think about it, Gordon's tender's always been kind of small for him because, you know, he's a big, grizzly, you know, Pacific, and he has like this dingy little Fowler tender. So it's like whatever. But I'm personally a fan, I would say. I think I'm a fan of this Gordon. I'm interested to see what sort of play sets they have with it. I feel like it would look nice if the Express coaches are proportional to Gordon, if you know what I mean. Not like super long, but like maybe like this, but like a little longer, you know what I mean? We'll see. But overall, I like this Gordon, and I think I like it more than the Thomas. I think them having the buttons on top instead of the switches is definitely a choice, but it doesn't really subtract from anything. It's just different. Perhaps it's easier for kids to press the button instead of like switching this back and forth. I mean, both are pretty easy, but I assume buttons are just easier for the children, so whatever. James is the only one so far I would say flat out looks bad. He's not very proportional. His buffer beam is massive. He just looks a little overly elongated. I like that he has his correct wheel configuration. I like that he has a removable cold load as well. His cold load looks really big, which doesn't really seem the same case with Gordon, so it makes me assume that James's tender is either smaller or that he has a randomly bigger cold load for some reason. I think James's tender might be smaller, but, I don't really have much to say about James that I didn't say about Gordon. I still don't really like the change they made to his nose, but overall, this James right here, I think it's the weakest one we've seen so far. I'm not really rocking with these Jameses. I like the side rods, I'll say that. I like the side rods. I like the black wheels. It's kind of weak as a iteration of James because of the running board and how long it is. It's just not a very good James, but, it's not a very good James. The only good thing I could say about it is I like the wheel configuration. The same stuff I said about the Gordon. I like the removable coal. I like the build quality of it, assuming that it's the same as this. But I'll only be able to know once I actually have it in my hand, so not much to really say about James. Next, we have Percy, who has a male coach with him, which seems to be an evolution of a previous tooling that they used back in 2020, 21, 22, something around there. This Percy looks very Railway Series. I think it's because of the funnel and how the saddle tank looks kind of less round and more like ovular, kind of like the Railway Series. Percy's missing his other lamp irons, which is strange, but taking a look at Percy's face, he looks older in a way. Not old, but like he doesn't look like a baby or a girl anymore. He looks just like just some guy, which I kind of like, because, the pet peeve about CGI Percy is he looked too soft, he looked too doughy. Nothing wrong with being soft, of course. I actually quite like CGI Percy, because it's like, he's just a cute little guy. He gets scared sometimes. If any of them are going to be the scared character, I don't mind if it's Percy. When it's Henry or Toby, that's just like obnoxious. But like Percy, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that, right? Percy, he looks like he looks like he's about to get up to some trouble, or he looks like he's about to hang out with Thomas and Toby. He looks cool, and I like the handrails. I like how they're a 3D piece. I think. Yeah, I like that, because none of these are a 3D piece. No, they're all molded in, like the handrails. Is it on a? Yeah, even on Flying Scotsman, they're all just printed. So I really like it. That's a 3D sort of ordeal on Percy. And the stickers seem to be the same as like on this style of Thomas. So they're really learning from the previous iteration of these toys. It appears they use the same whistle and dome tooling as that Percy back there. Overall, it seems to be... I'm really interested to know what the 2026 show looks like now, because it's like, they look very CGI, like the classic CGI show, but there's little differences that make me wonder, is this a toy thing, or do they actually look like that in the show? Overall, Percy's pulling the mail, very in character for him. That's a callback to the Christopher Audrey books from the 80s, and it's also a callback to the original Thomas and Friends show. I believe Percy also pulled the mail in All Engines Go, but, overall, I think this is a very nice Percy. It's very proportional, and I like it a lot. There's also an Emily in this range, but again, we don't have any pictures of it yet, so let's move on to Nia. Now, Nia is interesting because her front buffer beam is curved. Nia's front buffer beam is flat. It was flat in All Engines Go, and it was flat in the original series, the end of the original series. So that's kind of a strange creative choice. I'm not sure if it's going to be like that in the reboot, or if that's just a oversight, but for now, let's say that's an oversight, because we don't have any proof that this was an intentional move. It could be an oversight because James, he looked chopped, so this could be a chopped case for Nia. Overall, I actually like Nia's face here. I think it's a lot more, I don't know what the right word is, but I like Nia's face here. She looks really happy. She looks really cute. I love her nose. I love her lips. I really love her eyebrows. She just looks, man, she looks like a sister. Come on. That's the only way I could really put it. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. But she looks like a sister. I like Nia. Nia's really grown on me. When me and my best friend Freddie originally watched the Blubber movie, we really liked Nia. Then we watched the show and we were greatly disappointed at how bland she was, even though she was so cool in the movie. Nia's grown on me. I don't care. Nia's going to be in my AU. I personally really like Nia. I love Nia. She's cool. And I'm glad she survived over Rebecca, because I don't really got nothing against Rebecca as a character. It's just that, she seems kind of redundant. We already have Molly and as a yellow girl train, and we had a bunch of other random girl yellow trains, and Bubba, and plus Carly is yellow, the crane, and Hannah, Henrietta's sister, is yellow. All of them introduced in the same season, by the way. What was up with that? But I digress. Well, meant to be introduced in the same season. I digress again. She looks pretty much like her CGI counterpart. She seems to have reverted back to her CGI counterpart. I don't really have much else to add besides that. I like the face. I like the eye color. It's a carryover from Y'all Legends Go. I like the detailing. Mind Trolley is an interesting one. When it comes to the motorized range, I still don't like the coupling system. But that's really the only negative I have for the merchandise range. The coupling system. And for the diecast, it's the coupling systems and the fact that tenders aren't detachable on the tender engine. So, overall, Nia gets 2 thumbs up from me. She's long. Nia's meant to be long. That's something they miss out on. Especially, look at this. They're the same size. That's not acceptable, bro. I'm really glad that they fixed the size discrepancy with Nia and made her long like the tender engines, because, Nia's a tank engine, but she's long. I like a long tank engine, because, a variety in the railway. It's something new to learn about, the differences between different types of tank engines. I like that they made Nia long. I appreciate that a lot. So, yeah, I like this new Nia, and I don't really have anything else to add besides that, and that appears to be all of the new merchandise. So that pretty much concludes that part of the video. So overall, my thoughts on the new merch ranges so far, I think that they're very promising. And I think they give us a very interesting insight into the new direction the show is going to take and the new direction the merch is going to take. Overall, the only really bad things about this new merch line is the coupling system appears to be weak. I do not know what Mattel's problem is. All they got to do is use the hooks. They did it before. That the hooks, they're simple. They don't break. They twist. They can go in at either angle. You can tell all sorts of stories. Just give them the hooks. If you want cross-compatibility so bad, give them the hooks and introduce a lot of characters. Don't just introduce, the main 8 or whoever and, 5 or 6 characters that have sold well historically, and the new characters introduced. No, dude, introduce a bunch. Collect them all, man. Collector's cards, catalogs. Just bring it back. Do all the rolling stock, like Percy's Mail Train, Henrietta, the Express, Henry's Flying Kipper, the Tar Wagons. Bring it all back, you know what I mean? If Thomas fans, if you guys want to talk about the old stuff so bad, talk about the old stuff that's relevant to this. Talk about how they should bring back the rolling stock packs. Talk about how they should bring back the train sets that are actually train sets. Talk about how they should introduce a wider variety of characters in the ranges. That's the reason Wooden Railway 2022 floundered, because it had a great framework, but they just didn't do anything with it. They didn't introduce enough sets. They didn't introduce enough set pieces. They didn't introduce enough characters. They didn't promote it enough. It was only available in Barnes & Noble in the United States. I have no idea where it was available in Australia or the United Kingdom. I don't even know if it was available in the United Kingdom, because my best friend Ryan, who's British, he tells me he's never encountered them in real life. You can fact check me on that, but whatever. It's the past now. But talking about this new merchandise range, my overall thoughts, I really like it. I think the only bad thing, like I said, is the coupling system. And the only bad item out of all of these that I've looked at is that new motorized James. I mean, seriously, what is that? That's unacceptable. But everything else seems to be to a pretty high standard and pretty consistent scaling wise. And honestly, as far as the 2026 series goes, I'm all for it because you know what I don't want the classic series back. Let's be honest, because like I know it might be shocking to a lot of people because I do a classic series, railway series, derivative series, but it's like I don't know how to explain it. This might be too nuanced for a video this long, but it's like at a certain point you've already seen the best of something. You know what I mean? It's like the classic series was so beautiful and the Brenner era was so beautiful. And in theory, yeah, the Brenner era could have gone on way longer. I think it could have gone on to this day and still been fresh, new, and fun. But at the same time, it didn't. You know, the CGI series, the Brenner era, as we call it, was very good, but it ran its course and it's done now. Same goes for the classic series from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. It ran its course and it's done now. And now we're, you know, All Engines Go even. I don't like All Engines Go, but Jerome, German of Sodor, that's what he's called. He likes All Engines Go. And All Engines Go is over now. So he's going through the same thing that we went through with Classic Thomas. And now there's this new Thomas show. And quite frankly, I welcome it with open arms because here's the thing. When I look at changes like the characters' eye colors and the mixing of All Engines Go and classic series elements, and the Annie and Clarabelle having the new face and Gordon having a new color, you know, it makes me think they're gonna do something radically different. Because the little teaser for this series, and I will read it verbatim, this project will be a thrilling new journey that is set to delight fans old and new. Now, Mattel's lied to us before. Let's, you know, try and be optimistic. I have no reason to believe this won't surprise fans old and new. Because the thing is, this show so far has a classic series aesthetic. Classic series isn't CGI. Because listen, guys, you know, I'm 20, okay? I may have grown up with Model Thomas, but that stuff was already ancient by the time I was, like, conscious enough to be writing full sentences, you know what I mean? And the CGI show is over 10 years now. It's going to be 20 years soon since it started. I know, time flies. But CGI is basically the new classic. That's why all these toys say Classic Nia. Classic and Nia was a phrase I didn't even know went together. But yeah, I guess this is the Classic Nia, because now we have two new versions of Nia, All Engines Go and this series. Overall thoughts on the toy lines, they get 2 thumbs up from me. If I were to like give them some sort of grade that means nothing, so far, B minus. Because here's the thing, that gives them room to improve. They can move up to an A if they improve the coupling system. They can move up to an A. But if they add more characters and accessories and etc., make it like the Take Along and Wooden Railway range, like more, like make it so you could build your own Sodor pretty much and tell your own stories properly, then that's like an SS plus Ultra, like amazing toy line, right? But as it stands right now, I think this toy line has a pretty good foundation, and I think the new show is promising. What I would personally like to see out of a new Thomas Tank Engine series is rip the Band-Aid and just do something completely different, you know what I mean? Obviously have the hallmarks, you know, Tidmouth Sheds, Knapford Station, Thomas pulls Annie and Clarabelle, Percy pulls the mail, Gordon pulls the express, James doesn't like trucks, you know, Henry pulls the Flying Kipper if you want to, you know, dig that deep. Toby pulls Henry out. The trope, you know, the classic stuff. Diesel has to be devious, you know. And no more nice guy Diesel. I mean, we have nice guy Diesel sometimes, but like, have him be devious. Have him be the bad guy again. That's important. We need a bad guy. To my knowledge, All Engines Go didn't have a bad guy, like a proper bad guy. Diesel needs to be the bad guy again. So, you know, that's old stuff that should be retained. But in my opinion, that's not like boomer talk or like, you know, back in my day talk. It's just the identity of the show. That's why, again, All Engines Go didn't click with me. They changed too much about the identity of the show. This series, keep the core identity stuff, but maybe, you know, change the map of Sodor, whatever. I personally don't care when they change the map of Sodor. Change the lore, you know, add new characters to the lore, rewrite the history. Don't make the fans mad, you know what I mean? The fans only get mad when there's an assumption that the old lore still applies. That was the case at certain points in the past. Like at one point, we thought the old lore still applied when they were making The Adventure Begins, until much later we thought back on it and we realized, okay, you know what? Actually, CGI series is its own canon. It's okay that they did things a little differently. But with this new series, it's a clean slate. It's basically, what is this? Try number 5 of the new Thomas series. Let's just, clear the slate, write the lore over from the beginning, tell new stories, adapt old ones in a new way, have fun with it, have a new voice cast. Of course, you could bring back legacy voice actors. I wouldn't mind if the All Engines Go voice cast returned. What this kind of reminds me of is Total Drama, another show I like. In Total Drama, it went off the air around 2015. It was replaced by Total Drama Rama, which is basically the All Engines Go of Total Drama. I mean, that's an enjoyable show, admittedly, Total Drama Rama. But the thing is, it's so different from what came before it, to where it's like you can't even associate it as the same thing. It's kind of how I feel about All Engines Go. I'm sure All Engines Go is enjoyable if you completely divorce it in your mind from Thomas. But when Total Drama did come back, Total Drama Rama voice cast voiced the characters in the new Total Drama, and that included, some returning characters that were voiced by their Drama Rama counterparts. And, I kind of would feel the same way about this. This is a new series returning back to the classic Thomas look, but there's going to be some All Engines Go holdovers. Like, for example, maybe Gordon is voiced by Neil Crone again, and maybe he retains his, more fatherly, kinder All Engines Go personality. Fair enough. But again, I'm not against new talent coming to the show. I'm not against new interpretations of old things. In my opinion, the 2026 Thomas series will be good if it formulates its own identity while respecting what came before it. And what came before it was Thomas the Tank Engine, the Railway series, Big World, Big Adventures, and All Engines Go. And again, I don't like All Engines Go, but it is a part of the lore, and they, quite frankly, have borrowed quite a bit from it. They borrowed the eye color, they borrowed the decals on the Annie and Clarabelle, they borrowed a lot of things, as you saw here. So I'm all for new takes on the characters, and I'm optimistic about the new series, but that's basically all I have to say. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I hope you guys really enjoyed my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts on the new show are. Again, I'm actually quite excited to see what the new show is like. I'll talk about it on this channel when it comes out. Maybe I'll do an in-depth review if I feel like it. But yeah, overall, I think people should be more optimistic, and they should give the show a fair chance, because, it's not even out yet. And I feel like people are being overly critical because they're analyzing it from the lens of it not being what they knew before. But it's like, of course it's not going to be what you knew before. This is something new entirely. So it's like, it's not fair to judge something for what it's not. You should judge it for what it is. And for what it is, I think this is a very strong toy start, and it could be something really good. And same goes for the show, assuming that the show looks like these toys, I think it's a great start, and it could be something really good. We'll see. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe we'll have a part 2 of this video where I'm crying because the show is just another All Engines Go or another Big World, Big Adventures, whatever. But we'll see. But thank you guys so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for 800 subscribers. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. Assuming this is my last video of the year, see you guys in 2026, and I love you.